Well, hi, everyone. My name is Richard Bailey, and I have the honor, of course, of serving as the 51st mayor of the city of Coronado. The Coronado Shores Community Alliance Group was kind enough to send me over a list of questions that are important to the Shores community, and it's certainly my pleasure to answer those questions for everyone today. Of course, in the past, we had the opportunity to get together in person. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do that this year, but I am looking forward to hosting another town hall, actually live and in person sometime in 2021. So before I get into the list of questions, I want to read through the mission statement from the Coronado Shores Community Alliance Group. The mission of the Coronado Shores Community Alliance Group is to promote Coronado Shores as an integral and valued neighborhood of Coronado. Coronado Shores residents are known to actively support the betterment of the entire Coronado community, its families, infrastructure, and way of life. The Coronado Shores Community Alliance Group will serve as a bridge through constructive participation in all facets of Coronado community life. And of course, they concentrate on issues that directly impact the Coronado Shores residents. They have certainly been a wonderful organization that not just myself, but other council members have enjoyed working with in the past to have a better understanding of the issues and potential solutions that are of interest to the Coronado Shores community. So let's go ahead and get started. There are 11 questions. And the first question is in regards to the boardwalk adjacent to the Shores community. And the question is, we know that setting high enforcement standards is important for the city. Can the city place a blinking sign at the south end of the hotel's paseo before cyclists and others on wheels transition to the temporary walkway and continue on the boardwalk adjacent to the Shores? They need to get off their wheels, exclamation point. So appreciate the emphasis on there. And so the question goes on to discuss having various police personnel patrol in the mornings. It also discussed the additional police presence that occurred during the initial coronavirus lockdown that closed down the beaches. And so the real purpose of this question, of course, is to what can be done to increase safety along the boardwalk? And this is a question that's come up many times. So there are a few different ideas that we're discussing. First and foremost, we can certainly include better signage actually on the boardwalk. So we can put additional signage on the boardwalk, encouraging people to walk their wheels. The question specifically references a blinking sign, and we do have what are known as sign trailers that you might see around town. They're currently located in the business district, reminding people to wear a mask when out in patronizing our local businesses. We can relocate these sign trailers on a temporary basis to be adjacent to the boardwalk. However, we do have a limited number of signs, and so that would just be kind of a temporary solution. What we really see as a long-term solution is when Avenida del Sol, when the Hotel del construction is finished, we see that as a tremendous opportunity to start redirecting traffic that's caused from bicyclists or skateboarders, etc., to point down towards the Silver Strand and to help them point them towards the bay. And so we think that there will be an opportunity there through additional signage once that construction is completed. And also there is an art project that is being discussed right now that the city is contemplating funding that would be an aesthetically pleasing, helpful hint to cyclists and skateboarders to turn their wheels down towards their Silver Strand instead of continuing to head on the boardwalk in front of the Shores. Now, of course, having a presence from law enforcement officials is also important and necessary. Having a dedicated police officer walk the area in front of the Shores is something that can be done on, once again, a temporary basis. However, probably a better long-term solution for having a presence that's more consistent would be to work closely with our senior volunteer patrol. I've spoken to a few members of the Shores community who are actually interested in volunteering for the senior volunteer patrol as part of within our police department. and specifically monitoring the shores boardwalk. This is a way that the community can kind of take ownership over those problems. Even just providing that additional presence will keep more eyes on the issue and also help deter people from riding their bikes and skateboards on the Paseo. So we can certainly do the signage, the trailer sign on a temporary basis. We can recruit people for our volunteer police department force to specifically monitor that area. And we can also implement better permanent signage and construct it in a way that really directs everyone on their wheels to head towards this strand. So question number two. Question number two involves the strand between the shores and let's see, speed limit on the strand. So speed limit on the strand. Since we are a residential community, similar to the area directly off the bridge, please give your thoughts about changing the current speed limit to 25 or 30 miles per hour once the city is in control of the strand. Of course, earlier this year in June, the City Council unanimously approved accepting $22 million from Caltrans to take over the operation of State Route 75 and 282. State Route 75 includes the Silver Strand. So the Silver Strand, as of this moment, belongs to the state of California. However, later this year or early next year, we expect that Sacramento, that our representatives up in Sacramento and that the governor will pass a bill that actually gives Coronado local control of 3rd and 4th Street and the Silver Strand as well as Orange Avenue. Right now, the current speed limit along the Silver Strand in front of the shores is 45 miles per hour. However, as we all know, we do see traffic going much faster than 45 miles per hour along that portion of the strand. So the question involving, how are speed limits set? So speed limits are set based on what is known as a speed survey that happens periodically. Right now, for Caltrans, it happens about every 5 to, I think 8 years is the max that you can actually wait to do a new speed survey. And then what they do is they monitor the speed of traffic over a period of several days, and then they take the speed of the 85th percentile of all traffic along that route, and then that becomes the speed limit for that route. So that's kind of how speed limits are derived. There is a little flexibility within how speed limits are derived. However, in this particular case, since the speed limit on the strand is currently set by Caltrans, whether or not they exercise that little bit of flexibility they have to reduce the speed limit is really not up to Coronado. However, once we hopefully receive local control of State Route 75, which is something we've worked on for the past 4 years, and we're finally going to do it, something that should have happened many years ago. But once we actually receive local control of the Silver Strand, we can do a couple things. We can do a couple things before doing a new speed survey. We can go through what's known as a place setting exercise, which is, as we'll get to later in this presentation, by redeveloping the medians in front of the shores and creating more of a neighborhood-like feel as you come into, as you come up through the rec center, come up through City Hall, and the shores, of course, are on your left. We can really create a sense of place as you enter there, which should have a calming effect on traffic. We can also really step up enforcement on those areas and really try to change the culture of driving once we have control of those streets. And then we would conduct a speed survey. Do I think it's realistic for a speed survey to go from a 45 mile per hour speed limit down to 25 miles per hour? Probably not. Probably not. However, I do think we will likely see a further reduction in the speed limits based on a speed survey if we are successful in doing place setting, having a really nice landscaping palette that makes you feel like you're coming home when you drive up through the shores, and also do a really good job of speed limit enforcement going into the speed survey. So those are two ways I think we can really help bring down the speed limit in a legal manner. Question 3 is about the intersection of De Las Arenas and Highway 75. Of course, this is an issue that has come up many times during the 4 years I have been mayor. And the question is, I'm going to read through a little bit of background here, actually. So drivers making left turns out of the shores are often in a hurry. Residents have witnessed many near misses, and I know many people are worried that someone is going to be injured or killed because of a vehicle failing to yield in those crosswalks. As someone who's a runner myself, whenever I cross the Strand, I'm very vigilant of the oncoming traffic that's turning left, and even when you're aware of it, it's dangerous. Like, it's dangerous for the cyclists, for the runners, and of course, no one wants to be driving in a car that hits someone else. So it's a bad situation all around. A few years ago, we were successful in working to get Caltrans to simply restripe the crosswalks. That's kind of the best we could do at the time because we didn't have control over the Silver Strand. However, once we gain local control, you can certainly count on me to make the request of our traffic engineering team to evaluate that intersection. And as long as there's nothing that legally prohibits us from removing that sidewalk, especially considering there's already a sidewalk just on the just a little further south, based on all of my personal experiences and based on hearing from all the communications from the Shores community, I gotta believe that we would be successful in removing that removing that crosswalk once the city gains local control. And you certainly have my commitment on that. Beach fires adjacent to the Shores community. So I know this is another issue that has come up from time to time. It is a bit of, it is, an issue where we have fairly strong opinions on both sides of this. So I'd really like to touch on this. But so the question is, what are your thoughts on finding a solution that allow people to enjoy beach fires, but at the same time protect the comfort and health of residents by restricting beach fires to North Beach? So this is a great question. I really do appreciate it. It's a more difficult question than you might actually think. So a part of the communications we receive from residents living in the Shores, or our residents that actually live next to North Beach, we do hear from both residents in the Shores and residents near North Beach that the smoke from fires on the beach is problematic for their health, problematic for their quality of life. What makes this difficult is that we also hear from many residents of the Shores that they enjoy having fires on the beach. And we also hear from many residents in the village that they enjoy having fires at North Beach. And so this is one of those situations where it certainly is a nuisance for some, and it certainly has a potential health issue for others. But as of right now, we really haven't received a strong consensus from the residential community, of the village, and we really haven't received a strong consensus or heard a strong consensus from the Shores community that this is a change that they would like to see made. If this is a change you would like to see made, I strongly encourage you to work within your existing HOA, demonstrate a significant level of support, and then bring it to us. Because every time this issue comes up and we start discussing whether or not to change fire rings at North Beach or having fires in front of the Shores, we ultimately hear a great deal from people that live in the Shores or in the village that enjoy having fires on the beach. So I would encourage you to attempt to build widespread consensus. North Island Naval Air Station existing flight patterns. Question number 5. What can the City Council do to resolve the safety risks, reduce the pollution, and 3, quiet the noise? You all are probably very well aware that, especially in the last month or so, you have experienced a significant increase in the amount of flyovers that you are receiving. You probably hear them every single day. The short answer to this question, and this is an answer that I absolutely hate giving out, is that this issue is a little bit above our pay grade, in the sense that it will take either an act of Congress or the FAA to change the existing flight patterns. As of right now, although there are many observations of helicopters and planes varying off course, varying off the normal flight pattern, there's very little recourse we have as a city. The flight pattern is allowed by the FAA. The Navy currently says that this flight pattern is required for them. And so that's kind of the position that the Navy takes. The FAA currently allows it. So there's nothing we can do to force the Navy's hand to stop using that flight pattern. Now, the reason you're experiencing greater than usual flyovers right now is because one runway is down. So the two runways on one runway is currently down, and that runway is not likely to be completed until, I believe it's going to be April of 2021. So the bad news is that this level of air traffic you can expect to continue for the next 6 months. I would encourage you to reach out to our congressional representative, which is currently Scott Peters. It is something that we do bring up to Mr. Peters as well when we interact with his office, and we do have regular interaction with the congressman's office, and this is on our list of issues that we routinely bring up that are federal issues to him. But unfortunately, it's going to take either an act of Congress or the FAA to make any real significant changes there. Number 6, I absolutely love this question. This has been a favorite project of mine for the last few years. So the question is about median beautification. What is your position on beautifying the median on Route 75 that runs between the shores and the city hall? What can the city do to make this median a focal point for both the shores and the entrance to Coronado along the Strand? For the life of me, I cannot understand why nothing has been done for this median for the last 20 plus years. So my commitment to you when running for mayor was that this was going to be a priority for this council. And the good news is that a couple of years ago, the council put it within our what's known as our capital improvement program schedule. So we had there's a placeholder, and then last year the city council fully funded putting money in for design about 2 years ago, and then last year we fully funded putting money aside to actually not just design it, but also to build out the medians and completely beautify the medians in front of the shores. This has been, like I said, this has been a project that I think is long overdue. I committed to everyone on the shores that this would be a priority of mine. I'm very, very pleased that support on the council was completely unanimous for this. And we're going to be extending it all the way down to past where the rec center is. So it'll be a very nice opportunity to do some place setting to really improve the overall appearance as you come into the shores. And this really ties into helping to slow traffic, because as we all know, when you're driving through an area that doesn't look very nice, especially one that's a highway, you're not likely to slow down. But if you're driving through an area where it has really nice vegetation and you feel like you've arrived at a certain destination, you're going to just naturally slow down to begin with. So I'm really excited about this project. We are working closely with the Dell's timing on this project. So don't expect to see any like a shovel in the ground until the new intersection is finished up, which will happen in 2021. It'll happen in the third or fourth quarter of 2021 based on Dell's current schedule. And that's when you can expect action from City Hall. So we're not going to wait until that intersection is done to get started on all the designs. We've already started looking at some designs. We've already, again, approved the funding to make major changes to the medians. And so next year we will be presenting some different options, some different concepts for the Shores community to weigh in on. One concept I think makes a lot of sense is that based on the feedback the Hotel Del received from the Shores community about what their landscaping palette looks like for the entrance to the Del, I think at least one concept that should be considered would be borrowing from that landscaping palette. And that way it kind of looks like a seamless transition. And I think they did a pretty good job there. But we want to hear from the Shores residents, so there will be plenty of opportunities to tell us what kind of landscaping palette you would like in front of your community. And I will do everything I can to make that a reality. And from everything I've heard from the other council members, I think we'll have unanimous support on this. So the good news is it's fully funded and the staff has their direction to get moving just as soon as the Del project gets underway there. Let's see, number 7 question. What would you think of more bicycle parking for beachgoers? Perhaps a parking space or 2 at each site, designated as bike corrals like in the business district has on Orange Avenue. You know, this is actually a first I've heard of this as possibly being of interest to the Shores community. So it's something I would certainly be on board with. You know, oftentimes what happens is we look for guidance from the neighborhoods that are most directly affected by a particular issue. So in this case, if there was general consensus within the Shores community that you wanted to see additional bike parking in certain locations, we would, of course, evaluate what the easements allow and do not allow for the city to do. And if we're allowed to put in bike corrals there, and we hear from the Shores community that bike corrals are something you would like to see, then we would certainly put them in. I know we have a lot of avid cyclists, myself included, that love riding their beach cruisers around town, and I think this would be a great idea. Number 8, so I guess following up on number 7 real quick, I'm going to take that as an action item just to have our staff evaluate what our easements allow and do not allow in terms of installing some bicycle parking, and then we'll follow up with the Shores community and see if it's something they want us to pursue. Number 8, sewage runoff. So of course, the City Council made it a priority in 2017 to tackle this this century-old problem of sewage coming up from Tijuana and polluting the Pacific Ocean, of course, heading north and affecting the beaches of not just Imperial Beach, but also Coronado as well. And here's the good news. So earlier this year, gosh, it feels like it was decades ago, but earlier this year, right before the coronavirus lockdown, we received confirmation that through the USMCA trade agreement, federal funds were being appropriated, $300 million of federal funds were being appropriated to do a big project, that would divert the vast majority of all sewage from the Tijuana River Valley to a wastewater treatment plant and then pump it out after it had already been treated. The expectation is that the current number of days of transboundary sewage flow would be reduced from approximately 120 or so days per year down to about 20 or so days per year after this project is completed. So that is tremendous news. Here's the other good news. EPA Secretary Wheeler actually visited San Diego just maybe a month and a half ago. I had the opportunity to sit down with him along with Mayor Kevin Faulkner, County Supervisor Greg Cox, and Mayor of Imperial Beach, Serge Stedina. And Andrew Wheeler committed to making this the EPA's basically #1 priority for our region. He committed to having a shovel in the ground in the next 18 months for actually building this big project. And one of the points of emphasis we've been making is, we don't want to wait another year and a half before we see any progress, right? Like if there's any low-hanging fruit, if there's any small changes that could be made now that will start improving our environment, improving the quality of our water and our ocean, we'd like to see you move forward with those now. And so just a month and a half ago, Andrew Wheeler and his team at the EPA made a big announcement that they were beginning construction of 2 what are considered more minor projects, but still are going to cost a couple $1 million. But these more minor projects will divert a significant amount of sewage, actually capture sewage and debris prior to it entering the Tijuana River Valley. And those projects are actually underway right now. And so those aren't the big projects, that will reduce the number of days from 120 down to approximately 20 per year. But those are significant projects, and it's just wonderful to see the EPA really making this a priority. So hats off to the administration for making that happen. Hats off to our congressional delegation for making that happen. And it's just a great sign of what can be accomplished when we have community support, bipartisanship, and we get everyone on the same page. So it's long overdue, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And so it's not a question of if anymore, it's just a question of when. And that when is looking more and more like a year and a half for that big project to really get underway. Number 9, low-cost housing. What are your thoughts about solutions and possible locations for the state's mandate that Coronado must provide additional low-cost housing? So I'm going to expand on this question just a little bit further, provide some additional context. Because of everything going on with coronavirus, some may not be as familiar, some might not recall that last year, the state of California, as they do every 8 years, began what's known as a regional housing needs assessment. And this regional housing needs assessment occurs periodically, approximately every 8 years. And through this assessment, the state basically says, based on projected future population growth, we need X number of new housing units over the next, say, 8 years. And then they take this number at the state level, and then they distribute that number to the various counties throughout the state. They gave that number to SANDAG, which is our regional metropolitan planning organization. SANDAG has a representative on its board from every single city. I am Coronado's representative on this board. And the task then for SANDAG became to come up with a methodology that can allocate these I believe it was 160,000 housing units throughout all 19 jurisdictions in San Diego County. And the methodology that SANDAG ultimately decided to move forward with was to allocate these housing units not based on available land, not based on what your jurisdiction's current density was, but simply based on proximity to jobs and whether or not you had transit that ran through your district, ran through your city. So based on that incredibly simplistic formula, the city of Coronado ended up with just under 1,000 housing units that we have to figure out how to provide or how to allocate, how to accommodate during this next housing cycle. So we have about a year to put together what's known as a new housing element that will accommodate these 1,000 additional units. Now, when you look at our current housing element, we have capacity right now for 200 more housing units. You might ask yourself, Richard, where the heck can we fit 200 more housing units? How did you arrive at that number? Here's how we determined that we have 200 more housing unit capacity. If you look at all of the lots in Coronado, many of them are zoned single-family homes, and they have a single-family home on them. Many lots, however, are zoned for multiple units, say 3 or 4 units on a single lot. Some of those lots just have 1 unit on them currently. So the way you arrive at that 200 unit capacity is you take all of the lots that are underdeveloped, right, that are allowed to be zoned, that are zoned for 3 or 4 units, but only have 1 unit on them. And that delta then gets added to all the other lots, and you end up with a number of around 200 units. So right now, our housing element has capacity for 200 units, which means if we could somehow change the regional housing needs assessment allocation for Coronado of about 1,000 housing units down to 200 units, we wouldn't have to make any changes to our zoning. However, since we are currently at about 1,000 unit allocation, we need to somehow make up that delta between the 200 unit capacity we have and the 1,000 units that the state is mandating. What are we doing? Well, for starters, we're actually engaging in litigation. The city of Coronado, we don't want to engage in litigation. We never look to litigation as our first first recourse. But we've exhausted all administrative remedies. We submitted an appeal to SANDAG. We actually won the appeal to SANDAG by a count of 14 board members to 5 board members voted in favor of Coronado's position. But because of the hyper-partisan nature of the SANDAG board and because of some rules that really stack the deck against smaller cities, even though we had secured support from 14 cities, 14 board members on SANDAG, we still lost that vote. So we are actually suing SANDAG right now. Based on how that appeal vote went. So we're fighting very hard on that. And we are planning to make the case to, we're going to make a good faith effort to show that Coronado is uniquely situated because we have so many constraints that make it practically impossible for us to actually zone for 800 additional units. So we do have a multi-pronged strategy to address this. It is still possible for the SANDAG board to change their mind. And I'll tell you what, you want to talk about elections having consequences. Right now, the city of San Diego has outsized weight in the voting on SANDAG. And pretty much how San Diego votes is how the board will end up going. I can tell you right now that I can't make an endorsement in my official capacity as mayor here at City Hall, but I'll tell you this. I have a lot of confidence that if Barbara Bree were elected the mayor of San Diego, that she would be willing to work with smaller cities like Coronado to address situations like these, which just defy all logic. So, keep that in mind when you're talking to your friends over in San Diego of who they should vote for. I really do have a lot of confidence that Barbara Bree has said publicly that she wants more involvement from these smaller cities when discussing big regional issues. So please keep that in mind when talking with your friends across the bridge. Number 10, diversity and, excuse me, let me round out number 9 real quick on this housing issue. So depending on the makeup of the SANDAG board after the election in November, that might provide Coronado with another path to addressing this housing mandate. If that doesn't seem like a reasonable path, we of course are going to consider pursuing litigation to the greatest extent possible, and ultimately hope that more reasonable ideas prevail. Number 10, diversity and inclusion. What are your views on the issue of diversity and inclusion within our community? I'm just personally a really big believer in that. My job as mayor, our job as elected officials, and the job of City Hall is to treat everyone equally under the law. First and foremost, everyone is entitled to equal treatment under the law. When it comes to issues of diversity and inclusion, I'm also a really big believer in treating everyone with respect and based on the content of their character and their actions. That's how we make our hiring decisions here at City Hall. And when you look at our city staff, you'll find a pretty diverse leadership group here at City Hall between men and women and people of various backgrounds. And that's because we're only concerned with hiring the best. We're only concerned with hiring the best based on their experience, based on their character, and based on what they can bring to the table for the Coronado community. And I think that has served us well, and it's a practice that we will, of course, continue to move forward with. And then the last question I have here is in regards to tourism, and then I have kind of a bullet point list of some odds and ends that you all might find fascinating to kind of round us out. So on the question of tourism, please give us your thoughts on whether the city should continue to encourage expansion of tourism and how the increased traffic and resulting parking issues can be controlled. Believe it or not, when we count the number of cars every single day that come across the bridge, believe it or not, the number of counts are relatively flat. I know it does not feel that way, but that's kind of what the data shows. Ultimately, what the data shows does not necessarily matter to how we all feel about and how we feel it affects our lives. So a couple areas of emphasis for us. Many of you might be familiar with the Coronado Tourism Improvement District. This was a district that is comprised of our 4 major hotels. And what happens is a 1% assessment is made on the revenue that comes into each hotel for every night stayed by one of their guests. This 1% assessment is then belongs to that district, right? It's not tax dollars, it's something different. Belongs to that tourism district, and they were previously allowed to use that money pretty much however they wanted to. And many years ago, several years ago, they were using that money to advertise essentially to day trippers, to get a lot of day trippers to come over here, which was their mindset at the time. Over the last several years, what we've done, hearing from our constituents that feel very impacted by the traffic and parking congestion that tourists bring, is we said, hey, wait a second, there's got to be a better way. Rather than concentrating advertisements on day trippers, which have a tendency to, they'll bring their cars, but they'll leave their trash. Why don't we focus on business conventions? Business conventions where people are flying in to San Diego, they're chartering a bus to bring their company over to the Dell or Marriott or Gloria Bay Inn or the Lowe's, and then they're pretty much on foot the rest of the time while they're enjoying their conference. Maybe they bring their families, and so when those conferences finish up or those days finish up, they go patronize our local businesses on foot. That's the ideal tourist for everyone, because the truth of the matter is that our businesses and our business district simply cannot survive just with our locals patronizing their business. They just can't. They just won't ever survive. So tourism is a very important part of our community. Obviously, we all moved to Coronado because it's a great destination, and the weather's great, the beaches, the community, the businesses, etc., all make it a very attractive place to live. And because it's an attractive place to live, it's also going to be an attractive place to visit. So we did make that change to the tourism district so that they can no longer advertise to day trippers, but they really kind of have to go after what are known as those leisure travelers or those business convention goers. So although it might not feel like it, that is probably the biggest thing that's within our control. The city currently, we do not spend any taxpayer dollars on advertising to tourists. The city does not spend your money on advertising to tourists or anyone's money on advertising to tourists. Our job here in City Hall is to make Coronado a safe community, make sure our infrastructure is sound and maintained, and then accomplish those first two objectives in a financially responsible manner. If we can get those three things done right, then the residential and business communities are likely to flourish. So that's kind of our mindset on things. And so then to wrap us up here, I do want to just touch on a few other issues that you might find of interest. Let's see here. Parking meters. Parking meters will be removed in December. The City Council is pursuing a new direction with parking enforcement. What's going to happen is there will be free 2-hour parking everywhere in the business district beginning in Q1 of 2021. So you'll be able to enjoy parking free of charge. We will be enforcing that 2-hour limit though pretty strictly. So pay attention to that. Let's see here. There is a project in front of the shores on Strandway right now that is to replace the hot and cold lines that service the HVAC for City Hall. The project started back in September, and we hope to complete it next month in November. So hopefully that's not too much of an inconvenience for all of you. We are also getting much closer to moving forward with the undergrounding of utility lines over on Adela Avenue and Yanez in front of the El Cordoba Hotel. So that should be a really nice improvement. We also received submission of construction plans for Vaughn's. You may remember that for about 20 plus years, nothing had been going on with the old Core-Mart building. And we've been working with Vaughn's for the past 1.5 or 2 years to get some designs all buttoned up for them. And so those designs have been submitted, they've been approved, and now the construction plans are in the works right now. On that note also, once we receive local control of Orange Avenue, a big push that I'm going to be asking the council to consider, and we've already started setting aside money for this, is to reimagine Orange Avenue. I think there are a lot of improvements that can be made along Orange Avenue to make it more pedestrian friendly, to improve the aesthetics, remove some of the clutter on the sidewalk. And so between removing the parking meters, between Vaughn's new construction plans to take over that Core-Mart building, I think you're going to see a nice revitalization to all of Orange Avenue, and this is something that I'm going to want to see a lot of community input on. So stay tuned for that. But it really all begins with taking over Orange Avenue, receiving that local control. And then finally, little update on the coronavirus. The city has spent nearly $1 million in regards to various COVID-19 expenditures, everything from PPE for our employees, making different modifications to a lot of our essential equipment, the staff costs associated with responding to all of the changing health orders and the opening and closing of facilities. It has been just a monumental lift for all of our city staff. So I do want to make sure to thank all of them during this call. We really do have a great dedicated staff, not just in public safety, but also the people that handle the day-to-day administrative stuff. And it has not been an easy year. It's not been an easy year. I know for me personally, I have not been able to be as available to the constituents on an individual level as I really enjoy being. And it's largely because of just the constant changing, consistently changing health orders, and needing to be able to address those. So thank you all for your patience this year. I know it has not been easy for anyone, but I really am excited for 2021. Taking over receiving local control of the Strand, improving Orange Avenue. You're going to start seeing some great plans come out to address the Tijuana sewage issue. And as 2021 progresses and the Hotel Del construction starts to wrap up near the end of the year, at least its major impacts to all of you, I think 2021 is going to be a great transitional year to set us up very, very nicely for an exciting 22, where things are not only back to normal, but things are even better than they were before. So I think that takes me through all of the questions. And once again, it is just such an honor to represent Coronado, to represent all of you. My personal phone number is 619-335-7315. Feel free to shoot me a text message anytime to get a hold of me directly. My email is rbailey@coronado.ca.us. And really looking forward to hearing from all of you. And once again, thank you to Jan and Ann specifically for helping to organize this call today. So thank you all very much.